This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop.
Got it
Yeah,
in
stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, you know, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
All righty. Welcome to it, my friends. It's Monday. It's been a big weekend, of course, and a lot going on in news and sports. News and sports, of course. So we're keeping our eye on all of that and keeping you up to speed on all of that, of course, because let's start with sports. Let's start with sports because, well, of course, the Michigan State Spartans and the University of Michigan made it to the big dance, going to March Madness. Now, for Michigan State fans, some a little perturbed, to say the least, because the Michigan State Spartans, number 2 in the land, win the Big Ten tournament, and don't get a number 1 seed. They came into the 2nd position, but, you know, talking to some devotees of basketball, they say it's a good place for the Spartans to be. Say it's a good run, so they might actually even see Purdue again, because a lot of folks that I was talking to believe that Purdue can knock off the number 1 seed in the Midwest, that being Virginia. And so the Spartans number 2 in the Midwest. Anyhow, they're doing great. Tom Izzo says, I don't really care of not being number 1 seed. We're going to have to play. If you're a number 1, you're going to have to play a good number 2. How many times does it come down to that anyway? So he said it doesn't really matter to him, but there you go. Michigan is, so who are they playing to see? Middle Tennessee or somebody like that, I believe. Yeah, and the University of Michigan is an 11 seed. So we'll talk about that more later with Tim Staudt. We'll talk about that more later with Tim Staudt here on the program, the Dean of Sports. We'll shake down March Madness. So if you want to have your brackets ready a little bit later in the program and get some, you know, some divine intervention from Tim Staudt as to how to fill out your brackets, well, he'll be here. All right, the other story, of course, surrounding almost exclusively Donald Trump again, is Donald Trump owns the news cycle, and again, in a negative way. But you have to wonder. You do have to wonder who is setting this up. The big meltdown, I'm sure you heard about this, the big meltdown at the Chicago rally at the University of Illinois Chicago on Friday. He was supposed to, of course, have a big rally there, and then a bunch of protesters showed up. And as a result, it got dicey, so they shut the thing down. And after they shut the thing down, he pulled the plug out and said, I'm not going to come because there are safety concerns. Then it really got out of hand. You know, people being pushed around and some punches being thrown. And, of course, now everybody, Republicans and Democrats, attacking Trump for saying that it's his, you know, demeanor, his language, his message that is creating this violence. And it makes me wonder, because now we know that MoveOn.org openly, MoveOn.org, of course, being the George Soros extreme left-wing organization, openly taking credit for the protesters online. George Soros said he put $15 million into this effort. In fact, here's one tweet that went out, or here's on the website. Mr. Trump and the Republican leaders who support him and his hate-filled rhetoric should be on notice after tonight's events. And to all of those that took the streets of Chicago, we say thank you for standing up and saying enough is enough. To Donald Trump and the GOP, we say welcome to the general election. So they're threatening an American presidential candidate to disrupt and shut down his rallies, openly attacking the freedom of speech, whether you like it or not. He is a candidate for president. And then there were many in the crowd who appeared to be Bernie Sanders supporters. And of course, this violent demonstration may represent the precursor to the sort of activity the organization MoveOn.org will engage in as it tries to shut down its political enemies. It's Saul Alinsky. This is textbook. This is textbook liberalism. This is textbook fascism. Shut down the other message. Make sure there's nothing else to see. Nothing to see here. It will shut down its political enemies and elect either Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders. They will. So just so you know what you're up against. Meanwhile, the opponents of Donald Trump, were, like I said, clamoring to get on that train to blame him. Marco Rubio, by the way, now running third before tomorrow's maybe the biggest day of the election so far. Tomorrow could be for all the marbles. In fact, let's go to Donald Trump did take a chance to talk about the whole thing. This is a little bit long, but I think you should hear it. This is Trump blaming Bernie. Clip 2. Go.
A lot of them are, I don't even call them protesters. I call them disruptors. A lot of them come from Bernie Sanders, whether he wants to say it or not. And if he says no, then he's lying. Bernie Sanders, they have Sanders signs all over the place, and they're made by the same people that make the regular Bernie Sanders signs. They're professionally made. And we have great rallies. We have by far the biggest rallies. We have 25, 30,000 people at rallies. And out of that, you've had very little problem. And then what I did with Chicago, and I could have gone, it would have been easier for me to go and make the speech, and you would have had a clash because you had professional disruptors, thousands of them, from Sanders and to a smaller extent Hillary. Hillary doesn't have very much fervor, I will say that, and so people don't care that much. But you have Sanders disruptors going over there. You had heirs there. You had a lot of people there that I don't think is so good to be there. And I'll tell you what, I think what I did, and I've gotten a lot of credit for it, not from CNN. I watched John King this morning. That was a total kill job, the entire show. I was amazed at that show. It was like a total kill. But I'll tell you what, I've gotten a lot of credit from other networks, not from CNN. I've gotten a lot of credit for the fact that I canceled and postponed the other day in Chicago. Because, frankly, if I went up, we would have had my supporters have tremendous love of this country. They're tired of our country being ripped off by everybody. And I will tell you, you would have had a tremendous clash, and a lot of people would have gotten hurt or worse. And by canceling it, everybody dispersed beautifully. The police did a great job. The Secret Service was fantastic. And there was no injuries, no nothing. So I should get credit, not be scorned on your program by John King all morning long.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. If you watch in fact, Donald Trump was live on Friday with Don Lemon, and they kept showing the same little 20-second loop of two guys jostling a little bit, and Trump called him out live in the air. It was cute. You guys are being dishonest. Why don't you run something that's actually live footage? And they went to the live footage, and it's like real boring. He goes, yeah, there's what's really going on. Maybe you guys could tell the truth at CNN. But it doesn't matter. He's under attack from all the other candidates, and all the mainstream media are, joining in. What do you think of it? What do you make of it? Does it make him stronger? I believe it does. I believe it makes him look like he's the guy standing up to protesters and so forth. It makes him look stronger going into tomorrow. What are your thoughts? 888-900-9966 on the Steve Gruber Show.
Michigan, born and raised with Midwestern values and Michigan common sense.
All right, it is Monday here in the program. You see, Hillary had another coughing fit over the weekend. I don't think she's well. There's something where she's got some lingering illness, and it's not getting better. No, she's she keeps it up, she's going to end up with pneumonia, and that's just the way it is. You probably saw the guy trying to rush onto the stage with Donald Trump tackled by Secret Service. They quickly surrounded the candidate. He's had Secret Service protection since, I believe, mid-October. He's been wearing a bulletproof vest since that time because of the number of death threats he gets. The other side of this whole conversation in Ohio and so forth, John Kasich apparently not on the ballot in Pennsylvania. There's some trouble there. And Donald Trump pointing out that if he's not on the ballot in Pennsylvania, he can't win the nomination, and therefore, why is he even running? And he's taking on John Kasich, the governor of Ohio, straight on in his own state. It looks like Trump should win Florida easily. And I look at all of these conversations about, make no mistake. Any casual observer, let's say an independent, an undecided voter, can turn on and look at what was going on in Chicago. And if they filter through the nonsense being said by the anchors about how Donald Trump has created this air of violence, the event was descended upon by thousands of anti-Trump protesters, if you will, funded by George Soros and others. They came there to create trouble. That was their job. They did it. But to turn around and blame Donald Trump straight up for that is, well, silly, frankly. So in Florida, he is way ahead, and now in Ohio, the battle is for that state. These are both winner-take-all prizes. I believe Ohio has 66 delegates up for grabs. Florida 99, plus Illinois, Missouri, a couple other states are going to the polls tomorrow as well. And you have to wonder, okay, if Rubio gets crushed, he's in third place in the latest poll, by the way. If he finishes there, he's done. John Kasich has said if he loses Ohio, he will get out. And the polls have, well, there's different polls. I guess it's got about a 2.5 point lead in the average of polls for John Kasich. Yeah. Meanwhile, here's what Hillary Clinton said at a town hall in Ohio over the weekend. We're going to put a lot of coal miners and coal companies out of business. I don't think this is a good idea, Madam Secretary. You're telling the people of Pennsylvania we are going to put a lot of coal miners and coal companies out of business, which we already knew, but you actually admitted it. So for you union folks out there that have voted for Democrats historically for years and years, what do you do now? You've got a candidate who's diametrically opposed to many of your key positions in life. For example, supporting your family and going to work as a union member. You should fear this woman. If you are a legal gun owner, you should fear this woman and the entire party for that matter, but her specifically. She wants your guns. Barack Obama was able to get partway down that street. She wants to go a lot farther. A lot farther. Meanwhile, everybody wants to focus on Donald Trump and saying that he is toxic. Well, we're going to put a lot of coal miners and coal companies out of business. Quote, Hillary Clinton, isn't that a lot more toxic in the real world? Mm-hmm. All right, let's take, I want to hear Kasich talk about this in Ohio. He's fighting for his political life there in this campaign. Clip number 6, go.
When I saw the violence in Chicago, I just had enough. And you might recall, it was in the third debate where I started saying that Trump was dividing us. I also said that Ben Carson's plans on Medicare were outrageous. And so I've made my point. But when I saw the violence, Jake, I felt compelled to really say something about it. And I'm very comfortable with the fact that I waited until I felt it was necessary for me to say something. And look, that's what I've got to say about it. It's just not the road I take. But you know what? When you have a record of having success in relieving the frustrations of people, and let's face it, they're worried about keeping their job. They're worried about their wages. They're worried about they're not getting any interest in the banks. They're worried about their kids' future. You cannot win them by trashing Donald Trump or being negative. You got to explain to them carefully your vision, your record, your accomplishments, and what you can do. And that's the path that I have taken.
And that's the message he's taking to Ohio voters. By the way, he has a 77% approval rating among Republicans in Ohio. If it were a closed primary, he'd be in great shape. It's not a closed primary. It's an open primary. And those are the places that Trump thrives. Like he did in Michigan, like he will do again in Florida, like he may do again in Missouri and Illinois, and maybe in Ohio. But if Trump takes 4 out of 5 and John Kasich picks up 1 win in Ohio, does that really slow anything down? I don't think so. Here's something else I want to make sure that you heard from the weekend news. Sidestepping the Apple dispute for the most part, Barack Obama, the president, has made the case to access your telephone. They want access to your phone. Here's a quote. The question we now have is to ask if technologically it is possible to make an impenetrable device or system where the encryption is so strong that there is no key, there's no door at all, then how do we apprehend the child pornographer? How do we solve or disrupt a terrorist plot? But listen closely to the next part. That's all fine and well. What mechanisms, continuing his quote, what mechanisms do we have available to even do simple things like tax enforcement? Because if, in fact, you can't crack that at all, government can't get in, then everybody is walking around with a Swiss bank account in their pocket. He wants to access your phone so he can tax you more. They want to access your smartphone so they can tax you more and make sure you haven't saved a nickel anywhere. They want to tax you. That's the bottom line. It's not about the San Bernardino terrorist. It's about tax enforcement. How appalling. 25 after on a Monday on the Steve Gruber Show.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
Welcome back to it. It is the Steve Gruber Show on a Monday. And I want to share with you what we were just talking about. We'll get our next guest on the line here, though. Professor Allan Saxe, Professor of Political Science at the University of Texas in Arlington. Professor, welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you.
Hey, I want to share something with you. You can go ahead and listen to this for 15 seconds. We'll get back to we'll talk Donald Trump and so forth in the, the rowdies, if you will, in Chicago and elsewhere. But, I heard something that Hillary said over the weekend in Columbus, Ohio. And it struck me as, my God, she was honest. She can't be that honest because people won't vote for her if she actually tells the truth of what they intend. Go ahead, and this is about energy and our future in green energy. Clip 9, go.
Example, I'm the only candidate which has a policy about how to bring economic opportunity using clean, renewable energy as the key into coal country, because we're going to put a lot of coal miners and coal companies out of business.
How are you going to win in Pennsylvania if you're going to put a lot of coal miners and coal companies out of business? If you just admit that, which she did in Columbus over the weekend, how do you expect to win the state of Pennsylvania?
Well, the Republicans had better remind people in Pennsylvania about that. They have run so far a very, very poor kind of campaign, but in the fall, they ought to remind people about that. She did say, though, that she was going to help all the people displaced.
Yeah, please. Yeah, how's that? Was it going to have job training programs
that's right.
And what, job fairs?
That's right.
By the way, if you call the next Trump rally a job fair, trust me, all the leftists won't show up, so it'll be easier and quieter. Think about it. Yeah, think about it. If it's a job fair, they won't go anywhere near it. At any rate, so let's talk about the Trump phenomenon and the chaos, if you will. I mean, it's pretty obvious to anybody who cares to cut through the noise that this is a setup.
Well, of course it is.
It's a complete setup. They send thousands of people there, create a big ruckus, and then say, look what Donald Trump creates. It's like, well, what did he create?
By the way, in Chicago, Bill Ayers was there. I don't know if a lot of people know who Bill Ayers was. He was very infamous in the 1960s, I believe, for trying to blow up buildings. And there were some allegations, and it hasn't been brought up this time, that he was a buddy of President Obama's at one time. President Obama, I think, denied that, but there are a lot of people have made the accusation that Bill Ayers and a young President Obama were buddies at one time in Chicago.
Of course they were.
And Bill Ayers appears in Chicago at these riots. I don't know if he had anything to do with it.
Well, the understanding of most people is that Bill Ayers was the key person who got Barack Obama into the political arena, and that they launched and hatched his campaign, the first one for state office, in Bill Ayers' living room.
And of course, the media didn't talk about that at all over the weekend when they were talking about Chicago.
Yeah, the guy who was the single most important guy to launch Barack Obama's campaign, a known terrorist, an admitted terrorist, a proud terrorist, out there leading this crowd in this riot. Now, but the entire news media, Fox included, all going after Trump, all the other candidates. Well, he's created this toxic environment. He didn't bust in thousands of people to create a riot, did he?
That's right.
Am I wrong?
No, you're exactly right. His language probably is a little bit over the top. I've said that for a long time.
Yeah, let's be clear about this, Professor. You're not really a Donald Trump fan.
No.
Not at all. Not at all. But a setup's a setup.
But I understand that he's not the one doing the rioting. He's not the one running on the stage. There's lots of things that people say that I don't like. I don't scream and yell about it or cause a riot.
Right. You don't come in and create fisticuffs.
That's right.
And I'm following up another story of a Trump supporter that apparently got hurt, and I'm going to find out about that. A Trump supporter that was hurt badly because of the shirt they were wearing, and we'll figure just pummeled because they were wearing a Trump shirt. We'll look into that more. But where do you think this goes? I mean, you've got John Kasich fighting for his political life in Ohio. He may or may not pull off Ohio. But Marco Rubio, as of the polls this morning, running in third place in Florida, because I think every time I see this, and I see people like Hillary Clinton go, we're going to put a lot of coal miners and coal companies out of business. Let that be a warning to all union members nationwide. Your union doesn't mean squat to us. We're going to do, if we think you need to go, we're just going to throw you out. We've had your support for years. We don't care. And that sort of comment and that sort of atmosphere, what does it do to it? Boosts Trump supporters.
By the way, the very best moderator we've had for the Democrats for a long time was Jorge Ramos of Univision last week.
Oh, he was great.
He asked the kind of questions that was not asked by Jake Tapper yesterday on CNN or any of the others. He straight away asked Mrs. Clinton about the possibility of
indictment.
Of an indictment,
yep.
And she almost came unglued,
I'm not going to answer that.
But yeah. Jake Tapper was not about to go in that direction last
cowardly. Let me compare it to something I dealt with in my life. I used to live and work in Columbus, Ohio, right? And I worked for the NBC station down there as an investigative reporter. It's important because the Ohio State University pretty much controls the media in that town, and this is how. If you irritate the Ohio State University, you have no more access to their football program or their basketball program. You're cut off, and if you don't have that, you have no viewers. And so Jake Tapper dealing with Hillary Clinton is akin to that. Because if you irritate her, then CNN will have no access to the candidate for 2 days or 5 days or an increasingly longer period of time, depending on the penalty and how you treated Madam Secretary. Jorge Ramos doesn't care about that.
Yeah,
now does he?
He was good. He was excellent. In fact, that was the best. In fact, I would say that those moderators, all of them, were excellent.
Why? Because they actually asked questions. They actually asked real questions.
That's right.
Yeah, they were tougher than Fox. They were tougher than Fox News, by God. And I don't hear the Democrats out trashing, well, Jorge Ramos is part of the Republican machine. Please.
Last night, in fact, they actually asked, I think, a question of Bernie Sanders and maybe of Hillary Clinton as well. I couldn't watch all of it, and they were saying, who do you want to go around with? Who do you want to have dinner with? Something like, really tough questions like that at the end.
Yeah, it's pointless nonsense. It's
the
garbage.
Next one is going to be, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you like to be?
Well, what kind would you like to be, Professor?
That's right.
Yeah. And the sad thing is, well, maybe not though. When I was watching the footage, and maybe that when the little terrorists tried to storm the stage in Ohio and Dayton there, and the Secret Service surrounded him and pummeled him, and quickly surrounded Donald Trump, doing their job very well. Did you notice the backs of the heads of all the people that were looking at the stage from the perspective of the video I saw? They were all young people, really, like 20, 21, 22, all of them. There was a whole host of just piles and piles of young people. Maybe this whole idea that Bernie Sanders is getting all the young people isn't quite true.
What's going to happen is that in the fall, Hillary Clinton, I think, has already said this. She's almost demanding that Bernie Sanders campaign for her in the fall. And, of course, he will be very compliant and do so. He's been very compliant on not discussing the email controversy or anything like that. So Bernie Sanders is going to campaign for her in the fall, and that is going to be very important because she's going to need every vote she possibly can. But the Republican Party, what I fear, from a Republican perspective, is that the Republicans are going to sit on the sideline because of Donald Trump, and the Trump people may sit on the sideline if he does not get the nomination.
Well, that's for sure.
Work in both ways.
The Trump people are going to sit down, but I wonder if the Sanders people are going to sit down, because listen, there's one thing that is absolutely true, and there is no excitement. One of the comments we ran from Donald Trump this morning, talking about the fact that it's Bernie supporters because basically Hillary Clinton's supporters don't have that kind of gumption, basically. Now, hold on right there, which is a lot of truth to that. Hold on, Professor, right there. It's Monday here on the Steve Gruber Show. What do you think's going on? 888-900-9966. We'll be right back.
Getting your day started with news from around the state and around the world. Common Sense Radio. This is the Steve Gruber Show.
All right, welcome back to it. It's 45 after the hour. And with Allan Saxe, professor of political science at the University of Texas, Arlington, discussing the, I guess the whole dynamic of, attack Trump and have people attack the rallies. And then I think it backfires again. I think this backfires worse than Mitt Romney. I think that every time you attack Trump like this, in a way, you martyr him. And you make Trump the victim. Because people can look and they can say, listen, it's pretty obvious that he's, all these people are descending because you can see what they're wearing and what they're doing. And then you see these silly pictures of people wearing a Trump shirt doing like the Nazi salute. And then you realize, I saw this picture of one lady doing that exact thing. And then you realize, well, she's an active liberal Democrat from Chicago who bought a Trump shirt and then went out and tried to get herself covered doing, ridiculous things. It's bizarre.
Last night, there is a talk show in the evening that I happened to listen to last night. I think it's called Bill Cunningham. I don't know if you know him or not.
Oh, yeah.
And Mr. Cunningham had somebody on. I do not know who it was, so I'm parodying them. And they were saying, of course, that all of this is completely organized, and that and this was an interesting accusation, which I have no proof whatsoever about it, that President Obama has organized with other individuals thousands, if not millions, of young people to create chaos around the country. It did seem a bit far-fetched, but I don't know in regard to this. And I'm sort of asking a question. Have you heard of anything like that? He was making that accusation. He was talking to someone who was making that particular accusation.
Yeah. So here we are, going into tomorrow, which is this is the big day tomorrow. You got Ohio, you got Florida, Illinois, Missouri, North Carolina, and Missouri. Right. So there you go. Whoever comes out tomorrow, and if Trump wins 4 out of 5, and Marco Rubio comes in third place in Florida, which it looks like he very well could, and Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz absent from the and here's something else that I saw on social media. Ted Cruz comes out and blames Donald Trump for the chaos at these get-togethers. And I couldn't believe how quickly even Cruz supporters turned against him for suggesting what they knew was clearly not true, that somehow Donald Trump had created this atmosphere of violence in Chicago. Even Cruz supporters turned against their own man, and quickly.
People have a right to speak. This is a classic issue. People have a right to speak. President Obama said in Dallas the other day that when he was campaigning, nobody ever did anything like this. And then a friend of mine replied very interestingly, because the other side, conservatives if you will, treated him much kinder than his supporters treat his opponents. And that was a very interesting point. In other words, President Obama was right. There was no violence at his rally.
That's right, because the right does. We actually have jobs. We have work to do. We don't have time to. We're not professional protesters.
Riot.
Yeah, we're not professional protesters.
That's right.
We have jobs to go to.
Exactly.
Go to a protest. I don't think I've ever gone to a protest in my life. Now I would if it were big enough. It was a really big deal, I suppose. But I never have. I've got a job.
The question is this going to work? Because the media. Many Republicans are beating up on Donald Trump so badly. I really wonder if he can withstand it. That's just a question more than a comment.
Here's something else for you to consider as we go in. Illinois residents have already cast record-breaking numbers of early votes. In suburban Cook County, more than 101,000 have voted, and in the city of Chicago, 130,000 have voted. So 231,000 so far, almost 250,000 in Cook County and the city of Chicago, which is better than 60% higher than 2008, which was the previous record for a presidential primary. So it's pretty impressive, the numbers in Illinois already, huge numbers. And you wonder, can Bernie Sanders pick off Illinois too? Because I think he can.
I think he can too. And that's why Hillary Clinton wants to make sure that he campaigns for her in the fall, because everybody knows that she's going to get the nomination. It was cooked from day one with superdelegates and the way the debates were arranged and everything else.
Absolutely. So it's rigged. And what's going to happen, though, when the Bernie supporters realize that he's won as many places as she has almost, and that she's got like 2 or 3 times many delegates now, and by the time it's over, she'll have 4 or 5 times as many. But he'll get a chance to speak at the convention. He'll get a main speech, I would think.
No question.
So here's a guy who's not even a Democrat, an outspoken Marxist, democratic socialist. They're going to give a platform to. Whatever happened? Can you imagine John Kennedy looking at this guy, going, "Who are you?"
I know. It's an interesting. It's not even an interesting phenomenon. I knew that something like this could happen very easily, not only among young people but a lot of individuals as well. By the way, socialism, as you well know, has had a long history in this country. It's not anything that has just popped up. Eugene V. Debs, Norman Thomas. There have been many others at different times in American history who have garnered a lot of votes, sort of spewing the socialist line. It is very attractive to people that just don't want to think very, very much. And
well, this country has a long history of electing socialists. I mean, Woodrow Wilson was a socialist. FDR was a socialist. Barack Obama is a socialist. It doesn't matter, you can, and then you get the silly people. Well, is having a fire department a socialist thing? Well, in a way it is, yeah, but it's also covered under the Constitution for provide for the common defense. So there's certain things you can cover. But, yeah, we've had a long history of electing far leftist candidates as far back as Woodrow Wilson. And William Jennings Bryan came close to being elected on a couple of different occasions prior to that in the 1890s.
But, the language that Bernie Sanders uses, though, is language that I'm not sure Norman Thomas or Eugene V. Debs ever used. In a debate about a week ago, he used the phrase vulture capitalist. I haven't heard that in a long time. Vulture capitalist. It was really interesting. And then Jorge Ramos and the Univision people played some clips showing Bernie Sanders actually praising, many years ago, Daniel Ortega of Nicaragua and the Castros for the revolution in Cuba. And interesting, they really did a good job asking Bernie Sanders questions.
They did a nice job overall. I got to run, really Professor. Did. I appreciate it. Great conversation as always. We'll reconvene after what happens on Tuesday and sort it out again here in a few days. Professor Allan Saxe, thank you. Back in a moment on the Steve Gruber Show.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
So I've been scanning through all of the different columns written about the chaos in Chicago. And I found one here that I think really hits the mark by Rob Dreher. Rob Dreher wrote a column here. I want to share part of it with you because I think it hits the mark. And he, like many, were not Trump supporters before this all began, and now you have to wonder. I wrote yesterday denouncing the air of thuggery around Trump rallies, in particular the old coot in Fayetteville, who punched an anti-Trump demonstrator. I stand by that opinion. We cannot have a democracy if people are going to get physically assaulted at a political demonstration. That loudmouth protester was in the process of being removed from the building when the old man sucker punched him. He was arrested, and I hope he will pay the legal price. Getting the Chicago news, though, gives me a strongly pro-Trump feeling. These left-wing demonstrators tried to shut down an American presidential candidate's speech during the campaign, and they succeeded through an implicit threat of violence. People who support Trump drove hours to hear him talk, and they were denied their constitutional rights by left-wing hotheads who believe that they are so righteous that they don't have to observe basic civility. You come to a Trump rally and you start flipping people off. You should not be surprised if you get socked in the face. What happened in Chicago is why we need Trump, as obnoxious as he is, to keep going. I am not a Trump supporter, and I reject much of his rhetoric, but he has a right to give a speech, even an obnoxious speech, without it being interrupted by demonstrators. All of us do. Trump is revealing how impossible it is to have a normal democracy with the activist left, who think their crying need for safe spaces gives them the right to silence their opponents. No, this political correctness needs to be opposed, and it needs to be opposed with force. I don't know why the police couldn't handle the situation, but they had better learn to do it in the future because many Americans will not stand for it. What those protesters have done is to create a lot more Trump voters out of people who are sick and tired of privileged leftists using thug tactics to silence their opponents. I would feel exactly the same way if conservative protesters try to shut down a Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders rally. Protest all you want, but do so inside the venue or silently inside. Do not silence the speaker, because if you do that, you legitimize your opponents trying to silence the speakers from your side. Thuggish, illiberal tactics like this from the left call forth the same kind of thing from the right. When right-wing white nationalist types show up and make trouble at Democratic rallies or BLM rallies or get them canceled, on what grounds will you radical leftists have to complain? For me, it's all about the mob. I despise the mob. Any mob, which I define as a crowd that acts in force to silence people by intimidation or by actual violence. We have seen over the past few months how left-wing mobs on college campuses have gotten away with outrageous things because men and women in authority on those campuses lack the guts to stand up for the liberal civic order. This is why I cannot support Black Lives Matter, even though I support its goal of bringing critical attention and action to police brutality, because they believe that their cause is so righteous that they have the right to stomp over anybody who doesn't share their vision. Don't y'all understand that people like you only feed the Trump beast? This has gone too far when an American presidential candidate has to cancel his rally in a major city because protesters have made it too dangerous. We have a serious problem in the country. It's infuriating. It is not America. Those disruptive protesters need to be made to understand that is not how America works. And keep at it, leftists and fellow travelers, because if you do, you will get Trump elected president of the United States. Rob Dreher, and I think he's onto. That's what I was talking about earlier, and I think that he's onto it. When you shut down, see, because CNN and CBS and all these others, can sit there and well, they can try to make it look as if it's Trump's fault, but any observer can watch CNN and say, that's not his fault. You can see who these folks are and what their shirts say and their behavior, and you can draw your own conclusions. It's just the way it is. One of the battles tomorrow, I'm going to get in a couple of things here real quickly. The battle tomorrow, the big state, the big prize, I guess might be Ohio. Florida's pretty well in Trump's column right now, it looks like. But in Ohio, Governor John Kasich fighting for his political life there and to continue in the race. And he says that Donald Trump has created a toxic environment. Clip 6. Go.
When I saw the violence in Chicago, I just had enough. And you might recall, it was in the third debate where I started saying that Trump was dividing us. I also said that Ben Carson's plans on Medicare were outrageous. And so I've made my point. But when I saw the violence, Jake, I felt compelled to really say something about it. And I'm very comfortable with the fact that I waited until I felt it was necessary for me to say something. And look, that's what I've got to say about it. It's just not the road I take. But you know what? When you have a record of having success in relieving the frustrations of people, and let's face it, they're worried about keeping their job. They're worried about their wages. They're worried about they're not getting any interest in the banks. They're worried about their kids' future. You cannot win them by trashing Donald Trump or being negative. You got to explain to them carefully your vision, your record, your accomplishments, and what you can do. And that's the path that I have taken.
And moments later, Donald Trump, like he often does, responded to Governor Kasich and said he said he isn't tough enough to do the job. Clip 7, go.
Let me talk about your governor. Do you mind? For about 2 minutes, okay? I want to tell you.
because he's got, it's a boring subject, but we'll talk about him anyway. Look, he was the managing director of Lehman Brothers, which was one of the great catastrophes in the history of this world. Lehman Brothers failed and almost brought down the world, if you remember. And Kasich was a managing director. He was right in there dealing with all the big boys, all of the people that made these horrible decisions at Lehman. Another thing, he voted for NAFTA. You people forgot. He voted for NAFTA. Now, he was a congressman, and he voted for NAFTA. NAFTA has destroyed New England, but it's destroyed. You have fought for years and years and years, and you'll never recover completely from it, but you will if I get elected, because we're bringing those businesses back. Kasich is a baby. He's a baby. He can't be president. He can't be president. Too many problems. Too much on the let people come into our country, approve. Just the fact that he approved NAFTA. Nobody knows that. The fact that he was with Lehman Brothers when it took down the world. There's so many factors. He's not the right guy to be president. He's not tough enough. He's not sharp enough. In my opinion, he is. Maybe he wins Ohio, and maybe he doesn't. But
we'll find out tomorrow, that's for sure. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Big day tomorrow, like I said. Ohio, Florida, North Carolina, Missouri, Illinois. Big day. And if Trump runs the table tomorrow, then all of these efforts by Mitt Romney and the leftist movement, all for naught. 14 after on the Steve Gruber Show.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
Welcome back to it. It's the Steve Gruber Show on a Monday. You know, the Iranians continue to test and to fiddle and to ignore the United States with their deal that was put forth. And now that, Iran has basically had all the economic sanctions lifted, they're reconnecting with the world. It's going to be very difficult, a lot more difficult than you would ever believe, to go back and put sanctions in place. In fact, it won't happen. My next guest, retired Army General, Chaplain, and PhD James Hutchens here. James, welcome to the program. I don't know what to call you, doctor or pastor or general. I'm a little confused.
How about my first name, Jim?
All right, Jim, how about that? We'll go with that. You're very accomplished and an incredible resume here. You believe that Barack Obama's legacy could be a legacy of nuclear holocaust. Tell me what you mean.
Well, I think he has enhanced the hopes of Iran of performing a Holocaust. Iran has said that time and time again, and you mentioned this ballistic missiles that they launched this past week had in Hebrew written on them that Israel had to be wiped out. And I think, of course, he would not admit to this, but I think that the actions that Obama has taken with regard to Iran enhances that possibility. There's no question that that's what Iran wants to do. As a matter of fact, that is part of the agenda of ISIS and the Islamic jihadists. But that's going to be part of Obama's legacy. He's been very cozy with the Muslims. He claims to be a Christian. My sense is he's they call rhinos Republicans in name only. I think Obama's a Christian in name only. And I think he's demonstrated that time and time again in his attitude toward Christian and his attitude not to withholding any help for the genocide that's being performed on Christians.
Of course, if you say that in the light of day, I'm sure you have an interesting inbox in your email, but clearly you'd be accused of being a racist and a bigot because, you're only saying that because Barack Obama is black, I'm sure.
Well, not just because he's black. No, I don't think.
No, that's the accusation.
Yeah. Well, I'll receive that. I can live with that. I think you have to evaluate Obama's actions, not what he says, but what his actions are,
and how it really stacks up. So what his actions really mean and how it stands up. So my question then becomes. When you look at his policies here with Iran, and you look at the Christian genocide, which is very real from a lot of folks telling us that's what's going on, Where do you go from here? I mean, it's pretty obvious that this arrangement, this deal, it's really a treaty, I guess, although they won't call it that with Iran, is very dangerous going forward, and yet there's not much you can do about it at this point, from what I can tell.
Well, you're right, and I think what it leads to ultimately, I think it's inevitable. It's going to be a nuclear exchange. If Israel recognizes, their intelligence tells them that there's going to be a launching of nuclear weapon against them, they'll act preemptively. I mean, Israel has, for example, it's what they call its Samson option. And the Samson option is basically if they see they're going to go down, they're going to take down with them whoever's coming against them. And they have that capability. I mean, they don't talk about it, and they've never admitted it nor denied it, but it's well known.
So how long does Israel wait? You know, Israel will not sit there and wait for Iran to go, fully operational. So at what point does Israel strike?
I really don't know what that is. Only they would know and what their intelligence reveals to them. But I think it's just inevitable that they will do a preemptive strike to preclude Iran's exercises of their nuclear options. I think it's just inevitable. They'll have to do it. I mean, their survival is at stake. It's an existential threat to them.
Well, it is. It is, and it's right there, and it's right under their nose, and you know that they won't sit and wait. I just wonder if in this day and age, let's say it happened today, what would be the response of the United States? Would Barack Obama, condemn Israel? That's what would be my guess. Yeah,
or damn them with faint praise.
Well, he would condemn Israel and praise, the Iranians, possibly.
That's likely.
But what can you do about it? I mean, here we are. We know that it's almost impossible to go back the other way now. Yeah. I mean, what can we possibly do at this juncture?
I don't know that there's anything that we can do. I think that the inevitability of this is more and more obvious. It's just a matter of time before there's a nuclear holocaust. I mean, these weapons of mass destruction are in the hands of rogue nations, and there's going to be something out at some point, whether it's in North Korea or Pakistan or wherever, that sets this thing off. It may be Israel. It may be Israel if they see that Iran is going to launch an attack on them. But I think it's just a matter of time before we have a nuclear exchange. There's going to be a nuclear war. As a chaplain, from a biblical standpoint, I think that's in writing. It's in stone. That's going to happen.
And as a former general, as a former, person that worked in that world, you probably still know people that work inside that world. They probably have the same concerns.
Yeah, I think they do. We don't talk about it that much, but I think the realists take a look at the situation and say, yeah, it's inevitable. It's going to happen.
All right. Well, I greatly appreciate it, Jim. James Hutchens is a retired general, a chaplain, and a Ph.D., and a man who is deeply concerned about this deal with Iran. If people want to read more about you or find out more, what can they do?
Go to our website, Steve, the JerusalemConnection.us. JerusalemConnection.us.
All right, Jim.
And we're up to date on everything related to this.
Greatly appreciate it, my friend. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
It is Monday on the Steve Gruber Show. We'll be right back.
The Steve Gruber Show. American values with Midwestern common sense.
I heard an argument on the television yesterday between, I think it was Jake Tapper, CNN, with Donald Trump arguing about how many jihadists are on the world. And Jake Tapper says, well, less than 100,000 jihadists out of 1.5 billion Muslims on the planet. And Trump laughed. He said, obviously, you need to read the Pew report about how many people are sympathetic or would join such a military move, if you will, or become jihadists. Our next guest here to sort it out with us a little bit closer in what we really face, Robin Simcox from the Heritage Foundation. New Islamic State documents identify actually thousands of jihadis just in Islamic State. Robin, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Steve. Good to be with you.
And a lot of these folks are in the UK and in Europe and so forth. 51 countries identified here. Give me an idea what these documents teach us.
Well, these documents are passed over by a Syrian defector within ISIS to a British media organisation. Give us an outline of the scale of ISIS's recruitment, the fact that they can appeal to so many different nationalities. They give names, addresses, the contact details of some of these fighters. It provides a very specific insight into a period in ISIS's history towards the end of 2013 when lots and lots of foreigners were joining the group, and intelligence agencies are now hopefully working to track down some of those people.
So do you think it'll help find them, or are these people that are in Syria and Iraq and places that we, we'll find them with a drone, but we might not find them in person?
Well, I think it'll be a mix. There's definitely some names in there who have already been killed in Syria and Iraq via drone strikes. But there will also be those among the names that have returned to the West that the intelligence services will be very concerned are potentially plotting attacks back in their homeland. And while some of those names may be already familiar to the services and the agencies, I would say there's probably going to be some in there that aren't. So there's going to be some new leads for them to hunt down as well.
So, how do we come across these documents to begin with? And how, in the fight against terrorism worldwide, how important do you consider these documents to be?
Well, the documents came about because there was a Syrian member of the Free Syria Army who joined ISIS but became very disillusioned with how they governed this so-called caliphate. He became convinced that these weren't really religious people at all. There was a high number of Saddam Hussein's men within the group. And so he decided to defect. In terms of how significant they are, I don't think it's going to win the war on terror for us, but it does provide, it's a massive intelligence failing from ISIS's point of view, and great intelligence and figuring out who these people are and how to stop them is obviously going to be very key to keeping us all safe. So I think it's potentially a very significant blow to ISIS. It's not going to win the war, but it is a significant moment.
I'm looking at back at a Pew research here. 1/3 of United States Muslims, according to Pew Research, in a 136-page report, support Al-Qaeda and support suicide bombing and so forth. Are we greatly underestimating the threat in different places? I mean, I look at what you've got here in this latest report, and I wonder if we're just fooling ourselves.
Well, I think that what is certainly key is that we can't allow ourselves to get entirely wrapped up in certain groups, be it Al-Qaeda or ISIS. I mean, these are the most obviously dangerous ideological manifestations of this global problem of violent Islamism, but they aren't the only ones. And so I think what we need to do is be cautious about thinking, well, if we just defeat one group, then we've defeated the entire problem. What is the case is that there is an entire ideology that animates these groups that inspires, unfortunately, people to join their ranks. So we need to dismantle not just the terrorist groups themselves, but the entire ideology that makes people want to join them. At the moment, ISIS are the most visible and violent manifestation of that ideology, but it's one that exists throughout great parts of the Middle East and Africa, and we're going to need all sorts of help, and obviously Muslims are going to be a huge part of this battle in defeating the ideology.
But how do we organize it? Because the ideology continues to grow. And I think that, with half measures, which I find the United States involved with, taking half measures to eradicate, the seeds of this war, the seeds of these terrorists, the seeds of this religion continue to grow, unchecked in many places. Am I wrong about that?
No, well, I think that's right. The American response has been at times effective, at times less so.
Feeble.
I think I think, and I think in recent years there's been a lot to be desired from an American policy point of view, and also from its partners and allies. But I think we also have to say that there is a civil war taking place within Islam itself on this issue, and there are some things that America can do to help the process, and there's reformists, moderates that it can back. But that ultimately this is a battle within a religion that the outcome of which we may have very limited ability to shape.
That's right. That's my point. We have little to do.
And so, with that being the case, this is almost an issue that's bigger than any one president or any one administration can handle, and that's probably the most concerning thing.
We're with Robin Simcox from the Heritage Foundation. Well, Robin, I'll give you the last word on this, on where we go from here. We have little input. It continues to grow. It's, I believe, the fastest growing religion in the world. And if 1 out of 3, believes that jihad is the proper approach, then my God, we're breeding this every day. Well,
it's a frightening and extremely large challenge. I think we have to be patient. We have to try and defeat groups like ISIS. Keep trying to push the moderates and reformists within the religion. And remember, this isn't just a military battle, but an ideological one, and it's one we need to be in for the long haul.
Well, and I greatly appreciate you taking the time to talk about Robin Simcox from the Heritage Foundation. Thank you for the conversation.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
All right, there you have it. All right, so I want to just, before we round out this segment, I want to give you some numbers from the Pew research most recently done. This is a couple of years old, but still very relevant. 19% of American Muslims say suicide bombings are okay. That was as of 2011. A third of U.S. Muslims support al-Qaeda. Half of Muslims are Muslim first in this country and American last. 49% of U.S. Muslims said they think of themselves as Muslims first, not Americans. And if you add the 7% who refuse to answer or don't know, it's 56%. If you add those who said they're both first, it's 74% who do not identify as American first. Almost half of U.S. Muslims don't want to be Americans at all. 28% of U.S. Muslims said that Muslims should not, this is from Pew Research, this is not something from some, radical group, this is from Pew Research. 28% of U.S. Muslims said that Muslims should not adopt American customs. That number jumps to 44% if you count the Muslims who says they should both adopt American customs and remain distinct and not adopt American customs. 9/11 truthers, the majority of American Muslims don't believe that Arabs perpetrated the 9/11 attacks. And a third think Islamic extremism is just fine, 35%. These are real numbers, Pew Research. Check it out for yourself. 41 after on The Steve Gruber Show.
Genuine Michigan common sense on display every day.
Tell me, doctor, where are we going this time? Is this the 50s?
You heard me mention it here a little bit ago that in Seattle, a customer with a concealed carry permit fatally shot and killed a guy wielding an axe or a hatchet of some sort trying to attack a 7-Eleven clerk early yesterday morning. The customer, regular at the store, came in, shot and killed the guy. So a good guy with a gun gets it done, that's for sure. Rick Ecketer, National Rifle Association credentialed firearms trainer in Detroit, is going to be joining us here in a moment because there's so much going on, not only with the concealed carry conversations around the country, but concealed carry conversations on campus. Here in Michigan, of course, we're talking about constitutional carry, which basically means if you're not prohibited from carrying a gun, then you can carry a gun without getting any additional permission. 7 states are already that way. States like, Bernie Sanders' home of Vermont, where they have some of the lowest gun violence in America. You can, if you are not specifically prohibited from having or carrying or using a gun in Vermont, you can do as you please. And Vermont has one of the lowest crime rates in America. The Georgia Senate on Friday gave final passage to a bill that for the first time would legalize firearms on all public college campuses in Georgia, following an emotional 2-hour floor debate over the wisdom of letting students carry concealed guns on campus. House Bill 859 now goes to the desk of Governor Nathan Deal, who, with a sweep of his pen, can sign the measure into law. The legislation would allow anyone 21 or older with a weapons license to carry a gun anywhere on a public college or university campus, except for inside dormitories, fraternities, sorority houses, and athletic events. House Bill 859 would mandate that those weapons be concealed, something proponents say make it safer, since Georgia requires gun owners to apply for a gun carry permit that includes fingerprinting and background checks. That's all part of the law. If it becomes law, the bill would make Georgia the 9th state to allow campus carry, with nearly 24 others allowing individual schools to decide. Supporters of the legislation have also linked their effort to the safety of students, noting events such as recent robberies at Georgia State University's downtown Atlanta campus library that is only steps from the state capitol. So that's one of the big conversations going on. And here in Michigan, I think it's unlikely. The bill's been introduced in Michigan for a constitutional carry. I find it highly unlikely that Governor Snyder would ever sign the bill here in Michigan, but it is a push. It is a push that is happening not only here, but in Georgia and across the country. Gun rights, people are demanding more gun rights and more accessibility and more ability to defend themselves in a world that many see is ever more dangerous, and they want the right to defend themselves, period. And so that's where we are with it. We'll get back with Rick in the future. Shifting back to the election now for a moment or two. New polls show that Marco Rubio is trailing in Florida. He has fallen to third place now. John Kasich is in a dogfight now to beat Donald Trump in Ohio, and of course the claws have come out as they continue to battle for that state. Ohio is 66 delegates. Florida is 99. They're both winner take all. The other states on the menu for tomorrow are Illinois, North Carolina, and Missouri. All big prizes and all important. Every state that I just mentioned, except maybe Illinois, are critical to a Republican becoming elected president. Certainly, Ohio and Florida, swing states. North Carolina, swing state, has gone once for Barack Obama, once for Mitt Romney. North Carolina has. Missouri, always a tight battle, it seems. And right now in Ohio, John Kasich with a slight lead over Donald Trump. Now, if he wins in Ohio, but he only picks up 33% of the vote, then has he become the stopper? I would say no. And then the state to watch for me right now, is Illinois. I want to see how Donald Trump performs in Illinois after the ruckus at that University of Illinois Chicago event on Friday, where leftist protesters descended by the thousands to disrupt and stop the event, which they succeeded in doing, and shutting down a presidential candidate, shutting down freedom of speech by mob tactics, which is Saul Alinsky's tactics, and Bill Ayers, an avowed terrorist, there on hand, supporting the attack on free speech. The guy who helped launch Barack Obama's presidential, aspirations with Bill Ayers launched Barack Obama's political career in his living room. It's well documented, well known. Former bomber, attacked government buildings and so forth as part of the Weather Underground. Bill Ayers' past, well known, well documented. Should be in prison. Should be. And yet he's out at the University of Illinois Chicago, driving these people on, encouraging them to, attack Donald Trump's rally and then blame Trump, of course. So thousands of people descend upon the Trump rally and then blame Trump. It's crazy, frankly. And I think that it emboldens Trump. It gives him more support. People that were opposed to him are now supporting him. And I saw a big backlash from Ted Cruz supporters, for example. Ted Cruz supporters that said, after Senator Cruz came out over the weekend and blamed Donald Trump for the for the violence or the melee in Chicago said, you know what, Ted Cruz, we're no longer with you. We're smart enough to know that Donald Trump didn't bring in thousands of leftist protesters to shut down his own event. So there's something for you to consider as we move forward. We'll have a look at some of the final numbers at the top of the hour before we head to tomorrow's going to be a big day. Tomorrow could be make or break. If Trump runs the table, that could be it. It could be Hillary versus Trump. 52 after on the Steve Gruber Show.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me, gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy.
Been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
All right, it is Monday, and welcome to it, my friends. All of this conversation since Friday over the ruckus, the melee at the Donald Trump event in Chicago, at the University of Illinois Chicago campus, when thousands of protesters descended on the event in an effort to bring it to a stop, which they did. They stifled free speech in America because this is how the mob rules here. And I thought of some different ways to go through and explain the concerns. But then I found this article that I thought I would share with you from Daniel Greenfield. Wrote this on frontpagemag.com. It's an online source. And I want to read you this article because this one maybe better explains what the left is all about and why level-headed common sense Americans are fed up and what common sense Americans, no matter your political ilk, why you are frustrated and had enough and said, you know what, this needs to stop. Dr. Carol Swain was born in segregated Virginia. The second of 12 children, she grew up sharing a bed with her sisters in a shack that had no running water. Her family was so poor that she had no shoes and had to stay home from school when the weather was bad. She never did make it to high school. Now 1,400 leftist fascists have signed a petition to Vanderbilt University demanding one of the most respected African-American scholars in this country take diversity training or be terminated. The petition to force a conservative black woman to undergo diversity training comes from Nick Goldbach, a white hipster student and self-described urban enthusiast who claims that working as a waiter at a sustainable luxury urban resort in Connecticut taught him about, quote, common humanity. Nick cares about civil rights and social action, chic and unassuming dining experiences, and getting a black woman whose writings about race and racism were cited by Supreme Court justices. He wants her fired. And once that's done, Nick and a few of his closest social justice warrior pals can celebrate with another chic and unassuming dining experience. Dr. Swain had worked her way up from a GED to a PhD by taking a job at McDonald's, where the dining experiences were unassuming, if not especially chic. Dr. Swain's fiercest critics have always been hypocritical white leftists who claim to speak for minorities. She was targeted by the Southern Poverty Law Center, an organization whose white leftist bosses have made a fortune from exploiting black people. Now she has run afoul of angry white social justice hipsters who claim that she espouses hate toward minorities and that a black woman who grew up in segregation in Virginia needs diversity training. Joining the campaign against Dr. Swain is Emmy Arnold, a grad student running a letter-writing campaign to get the most prominent African-American scholar at Vanderbilt fired because poor, dear Emmy feels, quote, an obligation to advocate with and for people who are being oppressed, end quote. Emmy Arnold is white, feminist, gluten-free, and encourages followers on Tumblr to pay for the convenience of upscale grocery stores like Whole Foods or Trader Joe's. She was a member of 2 sororities. When she isn't shopping at upscale grocery stores, she's fighting, quote, oppression by oppressing an African-American scholar who grew up experiencing real oppression and is still being oppressed by the likes of Emmy and Nick and a few hundred of their closest Facebook friends. Emmy, who isn't even at Vanderbilt, has accused Dr. Swain of creating an unsafe environment for students who face enough danger off campus. What danger does a 61-year-old African-American PhD pose to Vanderbilt students? Does she beat them up in hallways? Does she secretly tempt them with gluten? Does she menace them with sharp objects while they sip organic kale tonic from Whole Foods? How did Dr. Swain create this unsafe environment exactly? By being an unapologetic Christian who remains true to her faith. By staying true to the political and social conservative values that enabled her to rise from poverty to a PhD. By refusing to be censored by the campus social justice warriors who claim that fighting oppression means eliminating dissent. By speaking out against Islamic violence and racism. It was only a matter of time until her spirit of truth-telling caught the attention of the furious campus activists who fight free speech with gluten-free vigor. Dr. Swain represents everything that they abhor: religious faith, hard work, reason, and, of course, common sense. When Dr. Swain responded to their insulting racist petition by saying that only an idiot would think a 61-year-old black woman who has spent most of her life in academia would benefit from sensitivity training, she was accused of ableism. The professor had committed the ultimate hate crime. She had been insensitive to idiots. And there are a lot of angry idiots on campus these days, as you may have heard. Mean-spirited little fascists driven to destroy anyone who reminds them of their own worthlessness, their shallowness, and, quite frankly, their outright ignorance. Dr. Swain's hard work, her accomplishments, remind them that they're privileged brats playing at social justice, organize cultural revolutions out of spite, silencing ideas because they can't win credible arguments. As John Proctor says in The Crucible, when confronting a system gone mad, animated by denunciations of vicious brats, now the little crazy children are jangling the keys of the kingdom, and common vengeance writes the law. That is what is happening all over again today. Alyssa Janko, another white Vanderbilt student targeting Dr. Swain, barks, Professor Swain is free to believe and say whatever she'd like, but freedom of speech does not equate to freedom from consequences. That exact argument has been used by every totalitarian regime in the world over the centuries. It is telling that the left has embraced the argument that it once rejected simply because it is now in power. Sinclair Lewis was wrong. When fascism came to America, it came wrapped in tolerance and sensitivity. Petition signers claim they want Dr. Swain purged because they care about everyone feeling welcome, safe, and accepted, or a community of acceptance and welcoming. It's intolerance in the name of tolerance. The only way to be truly welcoming and accepting is to drive out those who disagree. No one should feel unwelcome at Vanderbilt, a signer writes, while signing a petition to make Dr. Swain unwelcome at Vanderbilt. Petitioners complain that Dr. Swain has spoken negatively about Islam while ridiculing her own Christian faith. But like all fanatics, they are insensitive to their own hypocrisy. The last word on the petition belongs to Jin Zhu, who firmly states that people who think their beliefs are better than others' beliefs should not be credited as tenured professors. If believing that something is right and another thing is wrong disqualifies one as a professor, what will intellectual debate consist of? Well, intellectual debate won't exist. There will be a consensus of mandatory agreement. And intellectual debate is rapidly vanishing from campuses under pressure from mobs of cry-bullies, whining that they feel unsafe because someone has been allowed to disagree with them. Intimidated administrators afraid of losing their jobs abandon the values of discourse and look for human sacrifice. Instead of defending Dr. Swain's right to her religion and her ideas, Vanderbilt Chancellor Nicholas Zeppos echoed the grievances of the petitioners and only mentioned freedom of speech in the third paragraph of his statement as allowing for the expression of unpopular and offensive views. He promised to bring Vanderbilt's core values to bear on their demands for Dr. Swain's head. If a black woman who rises from poverty in segregated Virginia is the problem, well, then you can see what the real problem is, can't you? Back in a moment on the Steve Gruber Show.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
welcome back to it. It's the Steve Gruber Show on a Monday before the big primary states of Ohio, Florida, North Carolina, Missouri, and Illinois tomorrow. If John Kasich can't pull out the stop in Ohio, it could be a big run for Donald Trump tomorrow. We'll see. Liz Peek here joining us back on the program. Liz, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. So, all right, help me out here because I watched the same thing everybody else watched in Chicago on Friday. Thousands of protesters organized show up to disrupt the Trump rally. It succeeds, and everybody blames Trump.
Yeah, I'm glad you led with that. I have just been reading all the accounts, and I read all the accounts yesterday, and actually was thinking of writing a column about this. No one really needs to defend how the media has treated Donald Trump because he's gotten millions of hours of free time. But I must say this piling on is pretty extraordinary, and I wondered if you Googled hashtag Sanders protesters, whether you'd come up with anything at all. Nobody is talking about that. And I hate dishonesty and unfairness. This seems ridiculous to me.
Well, it's a cheap shot. And one of the big pushbacks I saw over the weekend on social media, on Twitter and so forth, were Cruz voters, Cruz supporters who listened to him say it was Donald Trump's fault. And they said, I can't vote for you anymore. You're dishonest. Because Ted Cruz to blame Donald Trump was a step too far for them. And it makes me wonder, in Illinois especially tomorrow, how big is Trump's win in Illinois tomorrow?
Well, it's an interesting question. He's certainly leading in the polls in all these states, and it has been expected that Cruz would give him a run for his money, certainly in Missouri, also to a lesser degree in Illinois, North Carolina, the states where there's good evangelical turnout, of course, favor Cruz, narrowing that gap. And what we know is that Cruz is the best organized campaign in this race. There's no doubt about it. I mean, he opens state offices. They're effective. They're hardworking, and they do a good job of closing the gap in the final days and weeks. But I do wonder, at what you're saying, it's not just Cruz, by the way. Rubio is doing the same thing. They are taking advantage of these scenes of violence and so forth to portray this as a Trump phenomenon, as something that's going to engulf the country should we elect Donald Trump.
Which is nonsense. Here's what I saw. The Black Lives Matter movement says they are going to shut down the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. Bill Ayers, the guy who started Barack Obama's political career in his living room, was on hand in Chicago cheering on the violent anti-Trump protesters. Nobody happened to bring that to mind and say, listen, there's Bill Ayers, the guy who started Barack Obama's political career, right there, leading the charge.
Yeah, and apparently they were organized not just outside to protest peacefully, but also more than 100 inside preparing to rush the stage. And then you sort of ask, well, what were they going to do if Donald Trump is speaking and they got there? Were they going to attack him? Were they going to beat him up? I mean, this really is sort of a media spectacle now, and I think you're totally right. It's being covered in a very biased way. And by the way, a friend sent me an interesting thing. I think it was off Craigslist yesterday. An ad looking for to hire people to protest at the Republican convention. So that is an effort that is well underway. You know, shades of the '68 convention in Chicago for the Democrats. This could be a really, really ugly scene, and really not one of Donald Trump's making. But by the way, going beyond that, I'm also just incredibly incensed that President Obama takes no responsibility for having created this divisiveness in the country.
None.
And is so smug about Donald Trump supporters and how awful they are.
Well, there was no violence like this at my get-togethers. That's right, Mr. Obama, because the right didn't organize thousands of people to come crash your party.
That's right.
Because, well, the people on the right all have jobs and don't have time to be professional protesters, so there is that, you know.
Well, and imagine if the tables were turned here and there were white supremacist groups going after Trump supporters. I mean, people would be screaming. So I really do think that this, I don't know if this will work to Trump's advantage, because a lot of people, I've run into people this weekend saying, oh, this is really dangerous, we're afraid someone's going to get hurt. Okay, but, let's remember who's doing the protesting here and who is causing the outbreaks of violence.
I think that Donald Trump needs just to call for unity with the police officers, because a big part of the attack of the left is, attacking police officers and all that they stand for. Donald Trump has solidarity with the police officers. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, I need your help to make this a peaceful get-together. Shutting down freedom of speech is the whole... is the foundation of this leftist movement. They crush all dissent. And freedom of speech, we believe in it as long as you say exactly what we allow you to say.
That's exactly right. And we're seeing that, by the way, for example, in climate change, the talk about prosecuting people and companies that disagree with climate change. This, to me, is a really frightening undercurrent in our society.
Oh, make no mistake. They're going to prosecute for hate speech as well and anything else. See, freedom of speech is under a tremendous amount of pressure in America right now as they shut down political, rallies for presidential candidates. They attack people that don't buy into the climate change argument. If you say something they think is a microaggression or somehow, hurtful to somebody, they'll prosecute you for that too. It's all coming.
Yeah, it's very worrisome to me because it is, and by the way, that is exactly the kind of nonsense that is giving rise to people impassioned about Donald Trump because he challenges that, which I applaud. I mean, I don't like all of Donald Trump's platform, if there is such a thing, and various other aspects. I don't like his personality particularly, but I applaud him for pushing back at some of the trends in our society that are very worrisome and very challenging to our freedoms.
And I think that Hillary Clinton and the Democrats ought to take notice that when you attack somebody openly, and it doesn't matter what CBS or CNN or even Fox have to say about it, people can see for themselves, just like the former Cruz supporters saw for themselves. They can get the truth. They know what that's a rigged setup deal. They know, and it could propel Donald Trump even farther along. I'll give you the last word.
Well, no, I think you're exactly right, and we may see that come to fruition tomorrow night.
Yeah, we just might. Liz Peek, always a pleasure. We'll reconvene the conversation after Tuesday.
Can't wait.
All right. Liz Peek, everybody, from FoxNews.com and the Fiscal Times. Great conversation. She is one of my favorites. Back in a moment on The Steve Gruber Show.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
It's alright if you love me. It's alright if you don't.
Welcome back to it on a Monday. Really appreciate your time here today. This part of the program brought to you by the Michigan 529 programs, making sure your kids and grandkids get the education they need. To learn more, go to SaveWithMI529.com. That's SaveWithMI529.com. I did it. It's great for the kids, and it gets you, a great head start, and you'll be happy with it, too. You can start with as little as $25, by the way. Since the shootings in Kalamazoo here last month, the spree that left several people dead and a couple of injuries, there's been a call for an alert system, like an Amber Alert type system. And State Representative Brandt Iden of Macomb County is trying to push through legislation that he says will make communities across the state safer in the event of an active shooter, like the situation in Kalamazoo. He joined us on the program. Mr. Iden, welcome aboard.
Hey, good morning, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing well. Glad to have you. I'm glad to have you on board.
Always happy to be on.
Well, I appreciate that, and always glad to have you here. So tell me what this system would look like, what the legislation looks like, what it's going to cost, and what you think what the benefits are.
Absolutely. Well, one minor correction. I'm actually from Kalamazoo County, not Macomb.
My mistake.
But and that was no problem. That was the impetus for this. And let me talk a little bit about that, if I could, for a minute, Steve. One of the big things that I heard when I talked to community folks, family members after the shooting was, boy, it would have been nice to have known what was going on, because this was Saturday night. And we have to remember that. People are out Saturday night. They're socializing. They're in their private lives. They might not be paying attention to what's going on in social media, the news, so on and so forth. And they said, boy, had I would have known what was going on in Kalamazoo, I would have maybe not gone out that night. I would have contacted other family and friends, in an attempt to say, hey, look, there's something going on. You need to be aware of your surroundings and what's going on around you.
I would have checked my powder.
Exactly. So what we've done is we've put together a bill similar to the Amber Alert, as you indicated, which would local law enforcement could contact Michigan State Police. Michigan State Police could then put out a notification that would go to radio, television, and your cell phone just saying, hey, look, there's an active shooter in this particular area. You need to be alert. You need to know what's going on.
Right, but at what point does it make the alert, I guess is my question. We don't want to frighten people without cause. Fair? I mean, that's
absolutely.
That's fair. So, at what point does it cross the threshold to trigger the alert system?
Well, and so what this does is this sets up a protocol. So the bill doesn't specifically lay out the specifics for what would constitute an active shooter. What it simply does is it gives local law enforcement the protocol by which to say, okay, we're going to call this into Michigan State Police, and we're going to make the determination as to whether or not this is an active shooter. Because you're absolutely right. What we don't want to do is cry wolf, because if people get too many of these notifications, as they do, they're just going to start to ignore them.
Well, my concern is this. The public has already been misled to the point, to a great extent, that there are more active shooters and mass shootings than there's been in years past, which really, the numbers remain about flat according to the FBI. And I don't want to discount or try to minimize what happened in Kalamazoo. It's a horrific event. But we need to be honest about how often this happens, which is really rare for the most part. But in the case that it does happen, if we can, use technology to keep people safe, I appreciate that. I just don't want to be, like you say, crying wolf on a regular basis and reinforcing this misconception about, violence, frankly, in America.
Well, and that is something that I understand people are a little concerned about. At the same time, a lot of people have said, it's too bad that the society that we live in today, we even have to have something like this. And I couldn't agree more. But for me, I believe that this is something politically that we can do in a bipartisan nature that could potentially save lives in the future. And that doesn't mean that other things aren't on the table. But, obviously the situation has a lot of conversation has been on the gun debate and some other things. And you know as well as I do, Steve, that these are conversations that have been going on politically for decades, and they're going to continue to go on. And I'm happy to have those conversations, but I want to enact something that bipartisanly we can get done. We can move through the legislature very quickly, and we can potentially save some lives.
Potentially, right. And again, I just don't want to reinforce a misconception about violence in America, or Michigan for that matter. We want to keep people safe, and if there's an active shooter like in Kalamazoo, that would have helped people in that specific area. So would your Amber type alert, your notification about an active shooter, would it be just in the direct vicinity? How far would it reach out?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So let's say you're from the Detroit area, you're over visiting family or friends in another part of the state, say Kalamazoo, you would have been in town that night, you would have gotten the notification. So local law enforcement and Michigan State Police can specify the area that they want to put it out in. And so if you're traveling in that area, you're also going to get a notification. But you're not going to get a notification if you're on the other side of the state, for example, because, again, one of those things where we don't want to cry wolf, we don't want all these alerts popping up on the cell phone. This would be an extreme situation where, we've identified the fact there's an active shooter, and we want people to stay away from the area.
But I understand. So how long do you expect the timetable on this to be? When do you expect this to happen?
Well, hopefully very quickly. Looking to try to get a committee hearing by as early as next week. Obviously, we just introduced the bill last week. Bill's going to go through Communications and Technology, a committee that I'm the vice chair of, so I'm looking to get good support from my colleagues both sides of the aisle and then quickly move it to the floor. I would love to have this bill in front of the governor in the next 60 to 90 days, if not sooner.
We're with State Representative Brandt Iden from Kalamazoo County after that terrible shooting down there. And I guess the only good news I can take out of that is the young lady that they thought had died that night, who was squeezed mom's hand and has come back. She's rallying in an almost unbelievable way. So she looks like she might actually make a full recovery from the things that I read.
Yeah, that is correct. She's recovering well. She's been released from the hospital. I will tell you, it is what I would constitute a miracle. This little girl is an absolute trooper, and it's amazing she's with us, and she's a fighter, and so proud of her here. That's for sure.
Yeah. So out of all of that nastiness, at least we get that ray of sunshine. Brandt, I greatly appreciate you coming on and talking about this. And when it gets closer, we'd like to have you back to talk about when you think it's going to be signed, and then how it's going to work as we get closer to launch, if you will.
All right, sounds great. Thanks for having me this morning, Steve.
Hey, great conversation. Brandt Iden, everybody from Kalamazoo County here, state representative putting through an Amber Alert type system, and I would guess the governor would sign that. It makes good sense. My only concern, and it's not really even pushback, my concern is that you don't push that button too often and reinforce negative beliefs about gun violence in America. There's not nearly as much as some would have you believe, and that's for sure. All right, well, if you watched it yesterday, you watched Michigan State win the Big Ten championship, holding off Purdue to win the Big Ten championship. And most Michigan State fans, I think most people in general would think the number 2 team in the country just winning the Big Ten championship would be a number 1 seed, but it wasn't to be. No, people like Oregon became number 1 seeds, which has some Michigan State fans, well, a little angry, I suppose. However, I would say that, hey, maybe it's a pretty good place to be. It looks like a pretty good path to the championship, as far as I can tell. University of Michigan also in as a number 11 seed. They were on the bubble, but they did have 22 wins, and they were able to push their way into the tournament. So good news for all basketball fans of Michigan. You got a couple of teams to watch, at least for a bit. I think Michigan State will be around a lot longer than U of M. What do you think? We'll have Tim Staudt here on the program to sort it out next. Stay with us on the Steve Gruber Show.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
It's alright if you love me.
All right, buckle up, boys and girls.
It's alright.
It's March Madness time, and man, I've never seen a group of people so upset over a seeding tournament in quite some time. I'm watching the social media right now. People just go and say that North Carolina and Duke get treated like pets by the NCAA. That 12 of those 15 tournaments of the last 15 years, either Duke or North Carolina have played the 2 opening rounds in the state of North Carolina. And they're just upset and saying Michigan State got a bad deal by being a number 2 seed. Here to sort it out with me, we'll let him referee this. Tim Staudt, the Dean of Sports, with us. Tim, welcome back.
Morning, Steve.
So what do you make? I mean, these people are hostile. They're angry that Michigan State didn't get the number 1 seed. What say you?
I was surprised, but I think on balance it's the best draw Michigan State's had in my memory for the NCAA tournament.
Best draw ever.
Best draw ever that I've seen. You could have given them a bracket sheet and said, here, fill it out any way you want, and they filled it out exactly the way that it works out for them to, in my opinion, to give them the best chance to get to the Final Four. Even then, the side they're on, they get North Carolina if you want to play the seeds out. That they wouldn't have to play Kansas, who I think is the biggest threat to win the thing until the championship game. And at that point, if you get that far, you know you're going to play a good team anyway. But when I saw the thing, first of all, I was surprised that Virginia was the one. But what difference does it make? I mean, they're just numbers, and they both ended up exactly where they would have been if they're 1 and 2 anyway. Okay, so, I mean, you can argue all that, but big deal. I mean, you can't, in my opinion, you can't fill out a bracket that's better than having Middle Tennessee and then the Dayton-Syracuse winner in St. Louis, and then you get to go to Chicago. I mean, that to me, you can say what you want about North Carolina and Duke. And remember, geographically, they're always trying to place these teams as best they can to start as close to, unless you're a really low seed, geographically as close as they can make it. So that looks like and the state of North Carolina always has first-round games in the NCAA tournament. The state of Michigan does not. Okay, if there was a setting in Michigan, Michigan State would have been in the state of Michigan. But as it is, if you told me they can go to St. Louis and Chicago and have the draw they have, I'd say I'd take that in a heartbeat and sign on the line before somebody figures it out that it can be tougher than this, in my opinion.
Right. Well, Tom Izzo had said here recently, I was kind of surprised when Izzo came out and said, listen, we have a legitimate shot at this thing. Not something he would normally say, but he said of all his teams, been 3 or 4 of them that he thought had a legitimate shot of winning the whole thing. And he says this is one of the teams, and now he's sitting in what you consider to be a perfect place. And a lot of folks said that, and I agree with you looking at the bracket, of course. I mean, how do you handicap these things? What do you say? What's his chance of pulling it off?
Just an eyeball test. I mean, you tell me. Would you rather play Purdue and Virginia in Chicago? It might work out that. Would you rather play Virginia in Chicago? Virginia can't beat them. I'm not saying State can't get beat. Don't get me wrong, because I think these 2 games they won Saturday and Sunday indicate that Maryland and Purdue are not high seeds, and Maryland and Purdue had a chance to win the game against them both times in the final seconds and couldn't do it. So to me, there are teams that are going to be able to play with them. But that said, I just think going into it, they avoid, it appears to me, if they play at their best level, a chance to get into Houston for the Final Four. And then once you get there, you're not really sure who you're going to see. What I feared was going to happen was if they won the game yesterday, they were going to be the number 1 seed in the West, and Oregon was going to be number 2. And I think Oregon can win the whole thing, to be honest with you. Nobody knows about Oregon because they play on the West Coast, and nobody ever sees them playing in the middle of the night. But Oregon is loaded, in my opinion, loaded, in a very good league, too. In my opinion, better than the Big Ten. But they avoided that. So, if they ever get to that level, they're going to get them in the Final Four. So I just think Michigan State, of all the teams in this thing, got the best draw.
No, I got you. So let's look at a couple of Michigan gets in, kind of a surprise to some, but a big sigh of relief in Ann Arbor. I think they're an 11 seed, but they got in the tournament.
Well, that's all fine, but how far are they going to go? I look at all these teams that just go crazy. I'm watching the Michigan players and jumping up and down and screaming. They're going to play one more week, okay, and then they're going to get knocked out. I mean, do they have a chance to beat Notre Dame? Sure. I think they're going to have a tough game with Tulsa, to be perfectly honest. Michigan's an average team. That's what they are. They're an average team. So all those average teams that are all excited about getting into it, that's all fine. But their chances of getting to the Final Four are minimal. I mean, Michigan's in a large group of teams that have a minimal shot to get to the Final Four. The teams that have got a hope, I think, that this can be their year are teams like Purdue and Indiana, which at times show flash, or Maryland, that have played well. But they've also hiccuped along the way, and everybody says, well, they're flawed and they haven't quite reached their potential and so on. But when they play well, they can play with anybody, all of which those teams can do. But they're not really a prime, seed, and nobody picks them amongst all those experts to make the Final Four. But those teams, to me, at least have hope. Michigan has no hope to get past a couple of games if they get that. I mean, that's just what it is. They are what they are.
But it's good for a program, right? To get to get into the tournament is good for recruiting, at least a little bit, isn't it?
I guess. I mean, I guess you can say, well, we made the NCAA tournament again this year, but Michigan isn't going to go very far. You've seen them play. They're not going to go very far. And frankly, I think Michigan exposed Indiana. Indiana can't beat an average Michigan team. How are they going to beat Michigan State? I think Indiana's lucky in a way they didn't get Michigan State and then got train wrecked in the last game yesterday. If they would have beat Purdue, and I'm not sure they would have. I don't know that Indiana's the Big Ten champion is what, a 5 seed? The Big Ten champion, there's no respect for it at all. The only team anybody talks about in the Big Ten nationally is Michigan State. But I think Michigan State, in my opinion, that's the best draw I've seen them get since Tom Izzo's been coach, relative to what he's hoping to achieve in April.
All right,
he's got the best draw.
In the last 30 seconds here, let's help folks with their brackets a little bit. Give me a couple of dark horse teams not in the Big Ten that you think might have a chance of winning a couple of games.
Well, certainly Oregon, even though they are a number 2 seed. I think Kentucky is playing extremely. Texas A&M and Kentucky, they played yesterday. Either one of those teams, to me, can make a run because they're physical, they're athletic, they've got shooters. I think West Virginia is a very dangerous team. There's 3 right there, along with Oregon. Take a look at those 4. They're gonna make a run in the tournament.
All right, you heard it right here. Of course, this is not a recommendation how you fill out your bracket. There's my disclaimer. Tim Staudt, always a pleasure.
Hey, buddy.
There you have it. Tim Staudt, everybody, on the Steve Gruber Show. Bracketology, I suppose. Best seed ever. Where else do you hear that, huh?